Welcome to Fire Your Hiring Habits with John Mitchell. This is the place where we dive into the world of talent acquisition, explore the challenges of today's workplace, and discover what it takes to build a thriving and successful organization.
I'm back with Judy Gilbert, the Chief People Officer at ŌURA, the company behind the smart ring that provides insights to help users improve their health and performance. Judy has had an interesting career journey. She has over 20 years of experience building strong teams and nurturing collaborative, supportive cultures. This includes a decade plus at Google, where she focused on people operations. Now, Judy, I want to get into your approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion at ŌURA. How do you promote DE&I in your organization? And what are some of the initiatives and/or outcomes that you are most proud of?
I think there's been a lot more focus on this in the last few years. And although I've worked in diversity and inclusion related spaces for a long time now, I think my appreciation for the work and the need for it has really evolved in the last few years. It's so important to business to have different minds and different perspectives and different toolkits to solve hard problems. And one way of ensuring that you can do that is to have people who come from all different walks of life and have done different things before getting to where you are. And getting them in the door is not enough. You need to make sure that people can also be heard and that you get those different voices and that you solicit those different perspectives. And not everybody is able to do that. Not everybody is comfortable, sharing their feedback or sharing their perspective in different settings. And so if we think about the recruiting piece of it first, we'll start at the beginning. Some things that help are honestly paying attention to it on the way in. So as you're doing a search, what does your candidate pool look like? I mean, it's so basic, but if you measure it, you'll actually pay attention to it and you'll do it. Typically, when we do a search, especially a senior level search, we want to make sure that by the time we get to the final round, our final round candidate pool has included at least some people of color, some women, some underrepresented minorities, and there may be other angles of diversity that make sense in a given search as well. But we try to make sure that our candidate pool has reflected that. At the end of the day, you want to choose the best candidate, but you want to choose from a pool that is diverse.
Before you go on, let me just make two quick comments here. So a big believer in the whole diversity provides better solutions. Getting different views just refines the product, the solution in so many ways that you just don't expect, as opposed to a group of just experts, if you will. And to me, diversity is not just, it is ethnicity, gender, etc., but it's also experience, background, regionalizations, just so many different things that just lend itself to helping make a better product. And then as you talk about the different pools, I talk about fishing in different ponds. When you're trying to find people, you're talking about at the beginning of the process here, so many people are like, oh, I can't find the right people because, unemployment figures and, nobody's applying. But if you look to different areas that just aren't as well represented, you open up different opportunities as well and can possibly find great people that you just didn't notice before because you weren't looking in the right place. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But
no, it's a great point. And I think one of the lessons of the pandemic, and it's shoving everyone into remote work, has caused us to think about, well, maybe we can look at different geographic areas.
Yeah.
And the ability to get people to move to the San Francisco Bay Area has been kind of a governor on growth in the tech industry, or had been previously. And I think really relaxing that constraint and saying, okay, what if we've got people who are based in different places and we're looking at each other on screens? There are ways to manage that. And not everybody has to want to live in the same place. And in fact, that gives us different perspectives and that gives us different ways of seeing the world. So it can be good. So that opening up geography has helped a lot with that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, our organization about 8 years ago went pretty much fully virtual. And, so we kind of yawned when people are like, oh, pandemic, we got to work from home. Like, yeah, okay, yeah, we've been doing that forever.
Yeah.
But, as you set those systems up, they also have to be set up properly so you can get the right kind of interaction you're talking about with the team. It's not just, I have a video connection, so now all is well.
Yeah.
There's a whole set of systems and I'll just say practices that, management and teams need to use to do it well. But sorry, I interrupted. So that was how you bring people in. What about once they're there? How do we help them feel included?
Yeah, some of the basics on inclusion. You want to make sure that you're paying people fairly. So you want to have pay systems that don't perpetuate what may have been old pay inequities. So we have pay bands that for given roles. And in a lot of states, you can't ask about somebody's past salary anymore. So it removes that anchor. But we try to pay people consistently for the work that they're doing, regardless of what they might have come in from.
You find that that's really an issue in many companies anymore? That are they not paying for the work that's done, or?
I think the systems are now in place in a way that even 5 years ago they weren't, and people have caught up. But old habits die hard, and I think unconscious bias is still a thing and will always be with us, and we just have to be aware of it. And so you still want to do the checks, after you do a round of compensation planning, you want to go and make sure that there's not some systematic anomalies that could be explained that way. You just got to stay on it. So that's one piece of it. I think different people need different things. And so recognizing that people are going to want to contribute in different ways. As leaders, finding ways to be more inclusive when you're running meetings and when you're doing different things. Paying attention to who are your speakers in large events and making sure that is a set of people who represent different parts of the company, different geographies, different levels, different kinds of things. Those kinds of things do a lot to build inclusion into the way the company just feels day to day. That creates that reinforces the culture that you want to have.
Excellent. Yeah, I find, to me, inclusion is so important because if you're, whatever it may be, some aspect of your life, if you feel like you're hiding that, the one I always like to talk about when I was in Massachusetts was nobody ever talked about religion. It was like, that was, oh my gosh, we better not talk about that. But any aspect of your life that it may be that you're holding back, it feels like if you're holding back a part of who you are, you're not offering as much of who you are to the organization or to your views. You're in this kind of, shielded environment. And if you can really break down some of those barriers and help people feel like it's okay to be who I am, all of who I am, then you're going to get better, true diversity when it comes out in terms of sharing of thoughts and ideas.
I think that's right. And I think a big thing that we can do as leaders is to be vulnerable, whether it's admitting mistakes that we made sometimes in a public way.
Yeah.
Admitting that we have families and that we go on vacation, and you want to find a balance because you want to be, you want to be a leader and you want to be doing the work and pulling more than your share, but you also like modeling that behavior of everybody needs a break is really important.
It's funny. That was actually one of my, another question I was going to ask. How do you model and embody the values and behaviors that you're expecting from your team members? So are there habits or rituals that you practice to stay healthy and productive as an organization to make sure that you're embodying these things?
So everybody has a ring, right? Everybody has an ŌURA ring. And culturally, we talk about things like our readiness scores. And sometimes, some teams have rituals where they'll start the meeting by everybody sharing their readiness score, their sleep score. And so it kind of normalizes things like, I'm feeling great today. I am not feeling great today. And one of our values is human first. And so it gives us a way to talk about that and to make it okay to, acknowledge these physical bodies that we're living in.
So in your culture, how do you cultivate a culture of feedback and performance management? Do you have some, processes or frameworks that you use to set goals or track progress or recognize these achievements that you could share?
Yeah, I think it's evolving as a growing company. We don't have a all singing, all dancing performance management system in place.
Does anybody really?
No, they don't. And it's so true. And everyone sort of hates their performance management system, but it's a very necessary evil. We're going through the process right now for next year. We're on a fiscal year that starts in October. And we start with, where do we want the company to be at the end of that next fiscal year? And what are the big things that we need to do to get there? And so we will set a fairly focused number of goals. I think this year it's going to be 3. I think last year it was 5 at the company level. And workshop that with the senior team, and then start cascading it down to the departments to figure out, okay, if these are our 3 big goals and these are some numbers associated with them, what does my team need to do to contribute to that? And because it's such a complex business with hardware and software and global and all those things, you can't do siloed department planning. You've got to do that in a fairly interactive way. And so we've got a team that coordinates all this stuff and makes sure that people are talking to each other and saying, well, if you're going to do this, then what does that imply for them? It's a fairly hands-on process, but at the end, we come up with team OKRs, and we can generally get that down to the individual level so that people have things that they are working on a day-to-day or month-to-month basis anyway, and they can trace that back to a company goal. I know how I'm contributing to that.
So just for people in the audience who may not be familiar with OKRs, it's objectives and key results, right?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, just want to make sure. So you talk about that in the team level, and you talked about it at a corporate level. Do you use the same tools to leader or across stakeholders in terms of investors or things like that? Do you or do you have other tools that you use to make sure that you guys stay aligned and informed at that level?
Having that framework that everything kind of rolls up into is really handy, because then you can use that as a way to tell the story. I mean, there are always ways that you modify things for different audiences because different people care about different things. But at a high level, having those few company goals provides a really useful framework. And if at some point during the year, some new thing comes up, it's pretty simple to have the conversation about, wait, is this part of one of the things that we said we were going to do? Or is this some new thing? And if it's some new thing, are we going to intentionally add that? And you have to have that conversation explicitly. And I think that's really important, because scope creep is such a big problem in a growth company. And if you've got a way to call it out, that can help make sure things are resourced, and it really sets you up for success.
Yeah, it's one of the challenges. There's so much opportunity, especially when you're doing something new, and everybody has their different ideas. But even in an older company, so IPC, we're a trade associate, been around for over 60 years. We're trying to serve the entire, electronics industry.
Yeah.
Millions of employees, thousands of companies. So obviously there's 100 billion things we could be doing. And how do you choose? How do you select? And so sometimes there is that thing that shows up. And you say, yep, we need to do this. But other times I love that, you're using that to just test it against. Does this fit into these things? If not, hey, maybe we're just going to leave that for somebody else. And you have to be able to say no.
Yeah. One of the things we used to do on the people team at Google was we always had a goal that was, we had the main goals, and then we had one that was, this page intentionally left blank. Because we knew that every year there would be some new thing that came in, and we had to keep some reserve capacity for that. So that's another way to handle it.
Well, let me tie a couple of these things together here with something new that's been, a lot more prevalent in the last, let's say, 6 or 8 months. AI. Many people were worried about oh my gosh, AI is going to replace the workforce and there's no more job. In terms of either developing the skills or utilizing it, is that something that you guys, how are you guys approaching AI? Is it part of it, or are you just like, oh, that's just a side thing?
Yeah, I think there are teams within ŌURA that have that are doing a lot of work on this, more on the product side of things. I think for us, from the people side, there's some places where it can be useful. I personally use some of these tools as kind of a brainstorming partner, or a way to write a first draft of something, and it can just get you over that hurdle because getting things started is hard. And so it can be a real efficiency play to just have something to give you that little push to to get over it. I mean, the issues are well known. I don't think we're at a place where we want to really deploy AI to do a big hiring thing, because it feeds back what's already in the system, and we know that a lot of our systems have bias built in. So you got to be careful, but like any tool, there are places for it to be useful, and so I think it'll live off.
I couldn't agree more. To me, it's like, we used to type on typewriters. Now we have word processors, and this is to me the next evolution of helping us get things done faster and more easily.
Yeah.
I talked in a couple of articles I've written. I talk about, you have the knowledge curve. It's just growing out of control. How do we possibly keep up with it? I'm like, just in time. You've got AI. You can start culling some of that down and making it approachable so you can use it better, So I just see it as another great tool. I love that you use that word. So let me broaden it out a little bit, just from your career. What are some of the most memorable or impactful projects or initiatives that you've worked on or led in your career? And then what were the key learnings or takeaways from them?
One of the things that I got to be involved in at Google was a study that we did to figure out how to actually interview people well. And it started out because Google in the early days had a sort of legendarily painful interview process where people would have somewhere between 12 and 20 interviews, and you would just exhaust candidates basically. And so I was part of a team that looked at this and said, all right, there's got to be some way to do this more effectively. Maybe we can use data to figure out if there are some interviewers who are really good, and then, clone them and figure out what they're doing and learn from that experience. We did this study, and a guy named Todd Carlisle, who's a good friend, was the main analyst on the study, and Laszlo Bach was the executive sponsor. What we found was not really that there are particularly good interviews, but the thing that we kept finding was you just don't need so many interviews. The incremental information that you get after about the fourth interview goes way, way down. And so we said, this is great. We're going to save, right? We're going to save so much engineering time. And so we went out and did this presentation, and we said, look, guys, it turns out you don't have to interview these people this much. And the response was, yeah, but we like interviewing.
We want to.
Like, we actually think this makes us more comfortable with candidates. And it was such a good reminder that you can have all this data that points to an answer, but it's still a change management problem. And so what we were able to do over time was to ask some more questions. We've got the data, but okay, well, what is it that you get out of the interview process, and how can we do this, and how can we make it a little bit more efficient? And we ended up changing it to mostly have just 4 interviews for a lot of positions, which was a huge efficiency play. But we also restructured the way interviews worked, so that we could be sure that we were covering all the different categories, and that you had some diversity on your interview slate. And we got more intentional about how did we do that, which let us get an answer that was, we felt good about the quality of data, and the people who contributed to it felt good about the process. So you had both of those things. And so it was learning from start to finish on that project.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say, oh, look, we're down to 4, but you're like, no, we didn't actually just do that. We took that and plot.
Yeah,
that's great. That's fantastic. So let me ask personally, some of your goals or aspirations that you have for yourself as the Chief People Officer of ŌURA in the future, and what are some of the steps or actions that you're taking to achieve?
One of the things that I want to prove is possible by taking this job is that you can have reasonable work-life balance and reasonable health while doing what I think is a hard, important job at a growth company. And this is something that personally I have not done a great job of historically. I have often tried to outwork problems and haven't necessarily taken care of my health. And as you get older, that becomes more and more important and more visible. Fortunately, there's this little device that I wear that tells me how my sleep is going and how, so that helps a lot. But actually listening to it and actually, paying attention and doing something with this data that I have is important. Building habits that prioritize the things that I say are important is a huge part of this. And so if I say that I'm actually going to sleep more or I'm going to exercise more, I need to actually build that into my calendar and make sure that I do it. And that means making trade-offs, because a lot of life is about not doing things that are actually important because you've got to prioritize. And so figuring out what is the work that really needs to get done, what really needs to get done now, I think it's pushed me to delegate more to the team, which is good for me and good for them. It's a good learning experience, even if we don't all get it right out of the gate. And to be really thoughtful about what are the things that we're just going to stop doing? What are the things that maybe made sense when we started doing them that we don't need anymore, that we've either outgrown or there's some better way to do it now? And so if we're going to do it, let's do it well and efficiently, but we don't have to do everything, and we can't.
Yeah, there's so many things you said there that I'd love to just unpack. But one of them, you talk about developing habits. To me, habits are to people as processes or systems are to companies. It's like building that routine, something that, say, okay, I value this. And so I'm going to put this routine into place. So I make sure that happens, Just like in a company, I want to make sure that these reports or these emails or these communication methods or whatever happen, you put that in place, not because you love to have a process, but because you want the results that are going to be led to at the end of the process. So the habits to me are that the same way on the personal level. So I just really love that. And what other things do you think an audience that's trying to find or keep the best people and create the best people, if you will, any parting thoughts or comments that, say, hey, here's a little wisdom for you?
People want to contribute to the community that they're a part of. And so I think finding ways to invite feedback and show people that their feedback is being used to change, to evolve the company, that's really valuable, to be able to give people that agency in shaping their environment. It doesn't mean that it's a democracy. And, it's our responsibility as leaders to bring the knowledge and the wisdom and the scars that we have to make those decisions. But those decisions need to be informed by the voice of the people who are part of that community. And I think that's really how you build a strong culture and hopefully a strong company too.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I talk about loving to work with passionate people. And the great thing about working with passionate people is that they're passionate. The bad thing about working with passionate people is that they're passionate. And, everybody gets a chance to be heard respectfully, but that doesn't mean everybody's passions get followed. You have to make choices, and that's okay. And we may be right some of the times, we may be wrong some of the times, but we learn as we go.
It's so true.
Thank you so much for your time today. Just really enjoyed our conversation, and best of luck as the Chief People Officer of ŌURA going forward.
Thanks so much, John. I really enjoyed it.
Same here. Thank you, Judy. And that wraps up another episode of Fire Your Hiring Habits. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a moment to subscribe and receive notifications for new episodes. Also, if you could spare a minute, I would greatly appreciate it if you could leave a review to help others like yourself discover the show. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.
This has been Fire Your Hiring Habits. If you want to empower your organization to reach new heights, go to johnwmitchell.com to find the techniques and tools you need to attract and retain the best team and boldly reimagine your workplace. Fire Your Hiring Habits with John Mitchell is a production of Forbes Books.